Welcome back to the Matsunaga Institute's Careers in Peacebuilding series. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome a key thought partner, Steve Killelea, to the conversation. A few of you are joining this conversation with some familiarity of Steve's work as the founder and executive chairman of the Charitable Foundation's Institute for Economics and Peace, IEP. There is so much we can say here about Steve and his work. Steve, you should know that we are joined today by a live audience on multiple platforms. So we will be doing our best to engage them throughout the conversation. Right in this room, we have some university folks, but we have others in the broader community who are eager to hear your reflections on the topics we'll cover today and on the theme of peace in the age of chaos. So note to all in the audience, if you're watching live and want to join the Zoom room, head over to Eventbrite to receive that link. Otherwise, this conversation will go live through the Matsunaga Institute, which has become a central repository for some class content, and within our extensive network of intergenerational peace builders within Matsunaga Institute, Seeds of Peace, the UN Association, Institute for Climate and Peace, and other communities. And we are, I believe, also on Clubhouse. Anyway, here it goes. For those of you who are watching and meeting Steve for the first time, Steve has had over a decade's worth of award-winning experience. He has delved into the important yet misunderstood concept of global peace. The concept is often oversimplified. And he founded the Institute for Economics and Peace, or IEP, in 2007 as an independent, not-for-profit global research institute, analyzing the relationships between business, peace, economic development, and justice. For his contribution to the global peace movement, Steve has been awarded the Luxembourg Peace Prize. He's been twice nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize and has been named one of the 100 most influential people in reducing armed violence by the UK group Action on Armed Violence. Steve is also the author of Peace in the Age of Chaos, the best solution for a sustainable future. And he is the creator of the Global Peace Index, an invaluable tool and resource to those of us who are engaged in the work of peace building across sectors. So this resource creates common language and standards for us to work in collaboration with others, and is one of the many tools to help inform how the various ways we can apply the positive peace framework and mindset in work and life. And so that's part of what we plan to get into right now. Welcome, Steve.
Well, thank you, Maya. It's very, very good to be here, actually, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Great. Well, let's get to a few of the questions that were submitted in advance, and then we'll follow up with any questions from our live global audience. Okay, so Steve, your career started on a path that many might assume erroneously doesn't have much to do with peace work. So will you start by sharing a little bit about your journey, recognizing that many students will be watching you? You know, how did your work start? How did you get here? And how did you begin to combine these various sectors in the service of peace building and action?
Sure. Well, to be honest with you, Mayor, I'm really an accidental member of the peace community. It's just sort of happened. And I guess most of my life's been like that. It's just been a flow. And so sort of when I was younger, my passion was surfing. So I spent a decade just traveling Australia and sort of the other parts of the world surfing, particularly Indonesia. And sort of I guess so used to be, and start off as really about 25, I started to settle down, got involved in computing and sort of did a course in computer programming, which I turned out to be very good at. But at that stage of life, very different than I am now. I was quite a shy, retiring sort of guy. I was a classic computer geek, I guess, in many, many ways. And so I invented 2 computer programs, and from them, serially, and launched 2 computer companies. The first one ended up publicly listed on NASDAQ and the second on Australian Stock Exchange. And they're both global company. So made quite a bit of money out of that. And then sort of thought, well, what do I do with the money? And so I thought, well, having spent a lot of time traveling and surfing, it takes you to a lot of poor places, and particularly sort of Indonesia, as you know, there's that bad poverty there. Although the country has improved remarkably since I was there. And so I decided to take the money and work with the poorest of the poor, and established a family foundation called the Charitable Foundation. Very simple name. And so we've done maybe 240 projects around the world now, direct beneficiaries, about 3.8 million people. And so we decided to focus on working with the poorest of the poor. And so that ended up taking me to a lot of war zones, near post-war zones and such. And then I was in northeast Kivu in the Congo, which is probably one of the least peaceful places in the world. And I started to think, well, what are the most peaceful nations in the world? And it was a fantasy question. I just wanted to see what was there and thought, well, maybe there's something I can learn to bring back into the various projects we're doing. So I got back to Sydney, searched the internet and couldn't find anything. And that's how the Global Peace Index was born. But for simple businessmen, such as myself, can be walking through Africa and wonder what are the most peaceful nations, and it hasn't been done, then how much do we actually know about peace? If you can't measure something, can you understand it? If you can't measure it, how do you even know whether your actions are helping you or hindering you in achieving your goals? You simply don't. But that also created a whole lot of other questions in my mind. And so one is just peace. How do you actually get it down onto really solid empirical footing? And then sort of what I realised as I started to look at it more and more, what people mainly study was conflict. And Global Peace Index is the absence of violence or fear of violence. So it's an inverted concept of violence, if you like, to arrive at peace. What people didn't do was study peace. And like that's the concept of positive peace. And so you don't get the same results studying that as what you would if you studied conflict. And best example is just through a simple analogy. So if we look at health and we look at pathology, great breakthroughs in pathology. Neither of us are going to die of a heart attack young. We're even curing cancers now. And so the study of pathology and fixing our problems is really important. But it wasn't until we studied healthy people we knew how to stay healthy. Right diet, correct exercise, a good mental disposition. Now, you're not going to learn any of those things through studying someone on their deathbed. And so it's the analogy with peace is the same. So the key thing with positive peace and the work we're doing is really how do you build the resilience into society so they're highly unlikely to end up in violence.
Well, and I'm so grateful that what you're pointing to is the need for a proactive approach and a strength-based approach, right? I mean, there's so much in schools, for instance, in the way of attention and resources being devoted to bullying. But that's after the problem has arisen, rather than considering the myriad ways that we can create climates and environments that are healthy, resilient, harmonious, involve strong communication and sense of responsibility for one another, and formation of compassion and opportunities to express it. And so I feel like that's what the Positive Peace Index allows us to consider. All of the myriad ways that each of us can input our energies and consider ways to participate, right? And so let's talk a little bit about the definition of positive peace versus negative peace. Many people, when they think about peace, they think about negative peace or the absence of conflict. And instead of that, we are focusing on building positive peace, which again involves a lot of participation. So without being too technical, for those who are less familiar with the distinction between positive versus negative peace, would you please share a little bit about this particular evolution of peace definition, why you focus on positive peace in your index, and what are some of the markers of positive peace that you think are most critical?
Yeah, sure. So we'll take a step back maybe and just look at peace. There are many different definitions of peace. And so, like, you've got the peace used by politicians, and that's when the guns fell silent at the back end of the war. Remember George Bush on the aircraft carrier declaring the war is won and peace has been achieved. You can find the fear, this personal peace, that might be the absence of afflictive emotions, for example. Might be personal peace, could be other definitions as well. Could be some sort of spiritual state. You've got peace, which can be associated with justice. So human rights would say that they're very, very big on peace. So you've got the concept of social justice, which can be a peace as well. Now, what I think is the definition of peace you want to adopt is what's dependent on what your outcome's going to be. So so that's the approach we've taken. So the Global Peace Index used the absence of violence, the fear of violence, as a definition of peace. And the reason we did that was because most people could see that pretty clearly as a definition of peace. There wasn't too many arguments around it. So we use that as our definition of peace. And it's basically made up of 3 different domains. So first is internal safety and security. The second is the ongoing conflict. And the third is militarisation. So most people can agree on that. Now, positive peace we defined as the attitude, institutions and structures which create and sustain peaceful societies. Now, to get at that, I think this is the power of our version of positive peace, is that what we did is we took 50,000 different data sets, then did a whole lot of mathematical modelling and statistical analysis to see the factors which were most closely associated with peace. What we did then was use further statistical techniques to clump those things together to get a better understanding. And that then became what we call the 8 pillars of positive peace. And so those 8 pillars, if we look at them, none of them are counterintuitive. But what happens is they all function as a system. So it's really important to have all of them active, all of them engaged, and all of them sort of going in the right direction. So there are things like well-functioning government, strong business environment, acceptance of the rights of others, free flow of information, acceptance of the rights of others, equitable distribution of resources, free flow of information, high levels of human capital, good relationships with neighbours, low levels of corruption. As I said, what's really key, they come together as a system. So you've got to think about this stuff systemically. So basically, now you can take those 8 pillars, and what you can do is you can change them around so that you've now got the ability to turn that into an index. Okay. Now, once you turn that into an index, you've now got the ability to be able to look at the momentum of countries to see, are they improving on the things which will create a peaceful society, or are they deteriorating? So that gives you a view now into the future. But also, I think this blew me away when we found this out, absolutely blew me away. So once we constructed this concept of positive peace in an index, we could then see what else it was associated with. So countries which are improving in positive peace have on average 2% per annum higher GDP growth than countries which are deteriorating. They perform better on a whole range of other economic measures. They perform better on measures of well-being and happiness, better on measures of ecological development and ecological support, and also much better on measures of development. So in many ways, positive peace describes an optimal environment under which human potential can flourish. And so that's quite profound, because that does give us a different view now into how we go about doing societal development. But this is also applicable to Western democracies as well. It's just not applicable to countries in conflict. You can apply it anywhere.
Absolutely. And I think that one of the valuable things that I would like our audience to keep in mind is that on these determinants of positive peace that you mentioned, and the list that includes well-functioning government, low levels of corruption, high levels of good human capital, good relations with neighbors, and so on. There are so many ways for each of us to enter the stream, as I like to say, to be involved, right? If you are in communications, you can contribute to the free flow of information. You can think about restorative narratives. You can build capacity for solutionaries to be heard and seen. If you are a social entrepreneur or in the business environment, there's so much that you can do to redistribute resources equitably and to think about utilization of human capital. And all of us can contribute to building good relations with neighbors through building understanding and reframing things from the perspective of distant and different others, and building bridges of all kinds in our workplaces, in our schools, and in our communities. And in terms of acceptance of the rights of others, that level of tolerance, compassion, understanding, all of us can contribute to movement building and to powerful work of social justice. And so the framework that you've laid out enables everyone to feel perhaps a sense of responsibility and to know how they can engage their energies and their human and other resources in the service of peace. So I like that very much. The Institute's sort of key research outputs really reflect the work of day-to-day life too. And so often when people talk about peace building, they think of it as something distant and lofty and coming from above. And I feel like you are helping us to understand, yes, the role of government and the importance of top-down commitments, but also the grassroots and sort of day-to-day work. So I'd like to talk a little bit about careers and some of the roles and careers that exist and might lend themselves to participation along the measurements and in alignment with your positive peace index. Since this is a careers and peace building session, what are some careers and ideas that you might share with our audience and viewers as they're navigating through their own career paths?
I think the first thing I'd say, Maya, is any career can be a peace building career. And so in a lot of ways, building peace starts within, and how you interact back out with the world around you. And that sort of includes, like, you're going into a coffee shop, getting a coffee. How do you interact with the person there? Do you smile, ask them how they're going? So how do you work with your colleagues? What's the way you interface with them? What your family, sort of the way you operate there? All these things sort of come back to sort of working at peace. So peace is not something which is abstract there. You go to and do at work for 8 hours, come home, and then you're something else. Peace is something which you're active in all the time. And look, my computer career, for example, it was based around working in the area called systems management. We used to work at tracking down problems in some of the most high availability computer systems in the world and correcting them before they you interrupted the service. And there were places like Hong Kong Stock Exchange, New York Stock Exchange, London Stock Exchange, major international switches for Visa, American Express, MasterCard. And so even something like that you can put into a peace lens, because you're actually making the world go around better. You're increasing the amount of money in society, and that goes to fund social service programs and other things. So just put that aside, okay? So just like everyone should take and file that in the back of the mind. It doesn't matter what you're doing, it can be a peace career. But now if we start to move down and look at where we can go, there's all sorts of avenues and options. So obviously we run a research organisation here. So if you've got good mathematical skills, you really like stats, that's a great thing to go and do. We've got educational facilities. Obviously, there's plenty of training around the work we do. So we've got a whole series of departments who work on that. The UN, obviously, you've got all sorts of different aspects there. So, like, obviously, the hard-headed ones are more or less in the UN peacekeeping operations or the UN Peacebuilding Support Office. But look, if you're going and working at anywhere, sort of like you're going and working, let's say UNDP on WASH programs, you're sort of helping people with peace then. It's a more broader definition of peace, but you're working on peace. Sort of obviously, it's also, if you're going into governments, there's all sorts of, if you've got the background in politics as well, on international relationships, foreign offices, there's all sorts of opportunities and areas and there where you can go. You've got the international overseas aid development organisations. They've also always got stuff in peace. And again, the aim really of the ODAs is, in the end, is to really improve peace. A lot of it might be through development, but in the end, that's what they want, improve peace. So those things you can do. You can go and join other areas, like there's the conflict negotiation centres, like the humanitarian dialogue out at Geneva. You can also go and sort of, if you want to branch out, become a psychologist, and then start to look at sort of how do you do advocacy for the underprivileged. That's helping to build peace as well. In fact, you can even do that using the 8 lenses of positive peace as a platform for systemic advocacy. Say an individual, sort of how do they feel about government, like well-functioning government? How do they feel about information? Is it relevant to them, which flows through society? Do they feel their rights are accepted? Do they feel they're getting a fair share of the pie, equitable distribution of resources? So you can sort of look at it, sort of even the area of counselling and how to be a champion for the underprivileged. You can come at it from that direction as well. If you set up a charity and you're working at a charity, which is working with the disadvantaged within, let's say, some of the poor areas in America, again, you're back, you're doing something for peace as well. So I could keep going, okay? But what I'm trying to get across is it's where you're working at peace, it's unbounded, and it's really down to the limits of your mind and what you actually conceive as building peace. So I could see this conversation as a peace building conversation. Anytime you're in a business negotiation, you can view it from a peace building perspective. Okay, that's how do you find the win-win rather than the win-lose scenarios. So you can do it anywhere. But look, there's a lot of students here, and I'll give you one of my lessons in life, and I say this to students all the time as they're coming through. What you really got to do is pursue your passion, okay? And you can use your peace building in whatever your passion is, as I've already pointed out. But generally, the things we really like doing are the things we tend to be good at. We tend to be better than most people at it. And seeing we like doing them, we tend to put a lot more time into it than other people because it's a joy. We're not there for the slog. And so there's a virtuous cycle there of picking something you're good at and working harder than others. And eventually you do end up better than the others around you. And guess what? You're the first person to see it. Others don't see it. Okay? It takes time. Then over time, people will see that you're good. You'll get the recognition. It might be a promotion or whatever, but you get the recognition. Then finally, money comes after that. So it's this process. If you get really good at something, there's a lag time to get the recognition. There's then a further lag time to start to get the rewards, then another lag time to get the money. A lot of people, and like once you just realise you're really good at something, and generally that's really good at boosting your self-confidence. But I see, particularly in business areas, all the time, people think, well, I want to go out and make a whole lot of money. If I make a whole lot of money, then people are going to recognise me, okay, and then I'll feel good about myself. And things the whole wrong way around. So for a career, pursue what you're passionate about, because that's generally what you do best. It's where you put in the most energy and effort. It's a virtuous cycle.
Mm-hmm. I would agree with that. And I know that we have listeners who are passionate about peace, and you work in the sector of sort of aligning economics with peace, but I appreciate so much your framework and reminder that each person listening can build peace with whatever systems are already around them and the gifts that they already have, and that it does not require a special degree or particular job title, and it's not something reserved for people of a particular age or means. In fact, those who have known defeat and suffering and struggle and loss, and who are on the front lines, can have appreciation, sensitivity, and understanding that can be very instructive for others. And so the gifts of frontline communities, in fact, are going to be absolutely necessary for peace building and for community source solutions. So I appreciate that. I want to ask you a question that just comes to me as you're speaking is, are you optimistic about growing peace on the global level and in your region? Do you consider the work of peace building as something that we've made progress on to a degree that enables or enlivens a sense of optimism in you?
Yeah, look, I'm neither optimistic or pessimistic. I can see both scenarios unfolding, and they both probably will unfold to a greater or lesser degree in different areas. And just to drive that home, so we went back over the last decade, more countries became more peaceful than countries which deteriorated according to the Global Peace Index. So, for example, 86 countries became more peaceful while 75 deteriorated. Okay, so that's good news. But on the other hand, global peace deteriorated. Why? And that's because more countries, when they fell in peace, they fall faster than countries improve in peace. So it's very easy to fall off a cliff. It takes a lot longer to climb back up it. So so now if we're looking around the world, there are different struggles in different areas. Like Europe, obviously it's got tensions with Russia, but those tensions are probably manageable, to be quite frank. We're not going to see Europe go to a war again like it did last century twice, ripping itself apart. There's obviously you've got the rise of China, and it's got a very assertive approach, particularly in the South China Sea and the Asia Pacific region, and that's a concern, and with a number of its neighbours. So that's a concern, that's a worry. How that plays out, we don't know. Okay, we've got to watch it over time. But there's real concern there. If a major war broke out between China and the US, it'd be very different than any war we've seen before, because of the economic interdependency between the two. It really would create mayhem in the international economics. Now, you move to other areas of the world, and if you look at the Middle East, let's say, I'd say, look, a lot of the issues there have been because of the superpower involvement, like Syria, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, for example, and regional powers as well. And so if those regional powers can sort out their differences, then it's peace there is possible. If we move over to Africa, the real issue in Africa is the ecological degradation. So if we're looking there, the population of the sub-Saharan Africa is meant to increase, or was projected to increase by 90% between now and 2050. You've already got 2/3 of the population in sub-Saharan Africa which are food insecure. And so these are big challenges. These are big challenges. So you've got the lack of water and lack of food. And so these areas are really challenged. So I think then if you go down to Latin America, well, wars between the countries, which were pretty common last century, have disappeared. But however, on the other hand, you've got very, very high levels of homicide and violent crime. So that's the challenges in that area of the world. So it's in different countries, in different areas, the challenges are different. So that's why I say I'm neither optimistic or pessimistic. It depends on the area and the situation we're talking about.
Yeah, what's clear is that we need everyone's participation. We need all hands on deck. We need folks to be working on all of those measures. From Professor Peter Hoffenberg at the University of Hawaii's in Manoa's history department, he asked, can we and our students find your pillars of positive peace building, your positive peace index online? He apologized he could not write fast enough, but they would be very helpful.
Yes.
And yes,
Yes,
but
you can. If you do a search on the Positive Peace Report, okay, you'll pick it up there. We're in the process of publishing another one that'll be released in early January, probably about January the 15th. So, but you can get the one from last year. And so that's the Positive Peace Report. So that's the best way of getting it. That'll outlay the index, so you'll have a clear idea of that. Other ways, go to our website, visionofhumanity.org, and you'll be able to go to the reports, and you'll be able to pick the report up from there as well. So there's a couple of places you can go to get at it.
And it's fascinating, it's comprehensive, and so you can use various parts of the report at various times for a variety of purposes. I do highly recommend reading it and sharing it, and it's wonderful that it's updated. One of the nonprofits I co-founded with Maxine Burkett, the Institute for Climate and Peace, is working with the Institute for Economics and Peace to bring some data around climate, and the IEP report is becoming increasingly comprehensive and well developed. I want to just remind folks, we have 18 minutes left in our webinar. We will be closing at 50 past the hour. If you are watching live via Zoom and other platforms, do share your questions with us. You can drop them in chat, comment under the video, or message the moderator on Clubhouse. The first question I'd like to share from a registrant has to do with your vision for the future, but also in consideration of your experiences in the past. What do you know now that you wish you had known at the start of your journey with IEP, with the Positive Peace Index? And what ideas and inspiration do you have for young researchers and students who are just getting started, but who might want to dedicate their lives and careers to peace research?
Yeah, I think the thing for me is the systems. Okay, we're getting right into societal systems, and there's very, very little research on it. There's some research into sort of the criminal justice systems and some in economics as well, but for the overall societal systems, very, very little research. And like, we live in systems, okay, and I can get into a deep philosophical conversation on that. So, but I'll probably stick away from it, I think, at this point. But we think in terms of cause and effect, and the cause and effect, well, I guess I'm getting into it now, aren't I? So we think in terms of cause and effect, okay? It's built into our subconscious. We can walk, we can throw a ball in the air, always falls, it's predictable. That in the old days, that taught us how to throw a spear. It gives us the ability to be able to use a knife to cut food. Even we walk because of the physics involved in it. And so empiric science was based around that concept of cause and effect, okay? So, but it's basically the effect doesn't influence the cause. And empiric science just said, well, seeing the physical world, they're separated. Experiments then became repeatable, okay? Anyone could do it to find the truth. Biological systems operate very, very differently. And so the effect quite often comes back and influences the cause, and that's called a mutual feedback loop. So the whole basis is very different, but our governments work in terms of looking in terms of cause and effect. Okay, here's a problem, what's the cause? Let's try and fix it. But you've got to understand the system and look at the interactions between the system, and then work from many different directions. Sometimes they won't be obvious, to really try and create the change which you want to see. So I think, without getting too detailed, I guess that's the main thing which I can look back and I can see, which I wish I'd known a decade ago when I started down all of this. What was the second part of the question again, mate?
Yeah, well, thank you. And I do think that there are interesting resources now for systems thinking and design thinking and futures thinking that you alluded to in your answer. The second part of the question was, let me go back to it. My apologies. What are some ideas and inspiration that you have
For researchers? Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, the first thing I'd say, look, one of the reasons I've been successful both in the business career and in the peace is I'm always looking for the white space on the canvas, okay? So if you really want to have impact, look at the things which other people aren't doing. And like a lot of the time, sometimes they'll be controversial, okay? Your best ideas aren't going to be in consensus where most people, their consensus thinking is. So look, really try and sort of challenge it. And you get a lot of pushback, but that's where you'll be best. Now, one of the things I've learned in my life, if you've got a really good idea, this concept of thought leaders, early adopters, followers and laggards, okay, comes out of computing. And sort of, so a thought leader is someone who sort of really comes up with original thoughts. And this concept of people who are early adopters and thought leaders, there might be, we'll make it up, there might be 0.1 to 1% of them in the population. Maybe some of you people are. So now, the other thing is early adopters. So they're people who can see a good idea. Once they hear it, go, wow, okay, pick up on it, run with it, work out how to implement it and adopt it. And then the next phrase is your followers, and they're people who may, once they see an idea implemented, they'll follow it and move on. And then the laggards are the ones who, well, they in the computing industry used to say they never got fired for buying IBM. Okay, so they're always following the safest bet. And now, sort of being a follower, okay, if nothing wrong with that. Most CEOs, really good CEOs, are a follower. Okay, and most of the person, board directors and publicly listed companies are followers as well, because they're looking for seeing that things work and then capitalizing on them rather than sort of going out and placing big bets. But in terms of being a researcher, you want to be looking at either being out in that thought leader area or early adopter. And the problem is if you've got them, the followers and laggards, you won't be able to recognize the idea. Okay, it doesn't matter how good it is, which means you need to move away from consensus thinking if you really want to go somewhere. I could expand on that a lot more, but I might stop there, Maya, before I get myself into trouble.
Sounds good. So early adopters and get that flow going. And as researchers, I've never really made that connection. And that's interesting. And I think about your early career riding the surf of that wave. I would like to ask a couple of questions that come from our audience here. One is the UN really helpful in securing world peace in your estimation? You know, what is your well-informed response on the UN?
Well, it's a good question. The answer to that's both yes and no, okay? So the UN does some great work, okay? So if we look in the UN peacekeeping operations, they're really good. UN Peacebuilding Support Office is great, but you've got to understand they're set in a political environment, okay? So you go to the UN Security Council, try and get a resolution out of them, because it's all win-lose relationships between big powers. So occasionally you get something coming out of them. But on the other hand, it does give a forum where they can actually talk. Okay, so we may not see a lot coming out of the UN Security Council, but there's a lot of energy going on at the moment for trying to reform the UN Security Council, which I really support. But there's also creates these backdoor conversations which we, as the general public, never get any insight into. So I think a lot of those kind of stuff's are really good. So I think there's a lot of in other ways, I think the UN could be a lot more efficient. Sort of, I guess, coming from a business background, I'm looking at productivity all the time. It just built into the way I think. So I look at the parts of the UN and they're highly inefficient. So I think there's real opportunities to be able to improve the efficiency. But having said that, a lot of the things they do are very, very good. Okay, so you look at UNHCR and support for refugees, absolutely critical, absolutely key. So that, and so if you look at UNDP, great development, a lot of great development comes out of it. Well, and we could keep going through a whole range of other departments within the UN as well. Sort of the things out of the UN, none of us realise. There's a body which sets UNESCO, not UNESCO, the scientific part of the UN. They set all the standards for things like the seatbelts in your cars, the baby carriages, the standard signs you use in a car, or the standard signs you see on a plane when you're flying. So we all see a sign and we know what it means. And so you've got all this stuff going on in the background you don't really see or understand. Then you've got sort of the UNODC, which works on the Office of Drugs and Crime, and that's really critical as well for just sharing intelligence on crime all around the world. So lots of good stuff, but the answer is yes and no when it comes to world peace. I think in some ways it's actually glacial. In other areas it does a good job.
That seems fair. We have a comment here from Peacebuilder Ben Carroll, who says, I'm glad to see an emphasis on peace as opposed to conflict resolution. From the 1980s through the 90s, there was a national conference on peacemaking and conflict resolution, which put peace first. This group was eclectic and inclusive and included many of your indices, like economics, justice, etc. Since then, most national organizations don't use the term peace as much. Mahalo for putting peace front and center again. So there was a comment, but there's included in there, embedded in there is the question of why peace has fallen out of favor and is often looked at as perhaps too abstract or idealistic or ineffectual. And why is it still a good term for us to use?
Yeah, look, thanks, Tom, for that question. So originally, when I launched the Global Peace Index, and sort of just before the first one's done, so I turn up in the States, and like I'd been around the world, then sort of been to Sweden, been to Den Haag, in the Netherlands, and a number of other places, sort of seeing whether the index would be a good idea before doing it. And I arrive in the States and I'm in Washington and everyone's saying, listen, you can't use the word peace. It's associated with the radical left. It's associated with fuzziness. It's associated with hippies. Why don't you call it the Global Violence Index, okay? And it's a negative measure of peace. So you could have done it. But I wanted to get peace for forefront and centre, because one of the aims of what I was trying to do with the Institute for Economics and Peace, in many ways has done, is to, and I think Mara mentioned earlier on, was take peace and move it to the centre ground as something which was empiric, something you could study, and something which was of a tangible benefit to society, rather than just simply as a moral principle. And we all agree with the moral principle, certainly, well, at least everyone on this call. But it was more really getting it grounded, okay, for people who sort of took a more pragmatic approach, I suppose, to life. So peace, that's why I stuck with it. And I think sort of the answer there gives some of the reasoning and question, and some of the thinking in the background why peace dropped away. Like people were talking, human security, okay? And like human security is great, but it's just another form of security. It's another form of negative peace. It's nothing flourishing about that, is there?
I really am so grateful for this work to reframe peace as action-oriented and positive, and your strength-based approach is critical. I want to, given the 6 minutes that remain, ask for a flash round. I have 3 remaining questions. If you can answer them in 2 minutes each. We have professors here who ask about resources for students. Are there others that come to mind that you might want to share in addition to the report? For instance, do you recall any particular readings, articles, or talks or resources that were inspirational and informative to you at various junctures?
Look, Leo Tolstoy, I just think it's more the study of his life. Like it's an inspirational story. He was a great man. Sort of the Mahatma Gandhi. He's the letters with the Mahatma Gandhi. Really, that's where Mahatma Gandhi developed his civil disobedience programs from. Was from those interchanges with the Leo Tolstoy. So getting behind the man, okay, so I'm getting behind the Gandhi, understanding what actually created them as human beings. I think it's powerful stuff.
Not many people remember Leo Tolstoy's effects on Mahatma Gandhi, and which later, of course, informed MLK and his work in nonviolent social change. So, thank you for reminding people of Tolstoy's work and complexity.
So I think that's really important. I think there's books by the Dalai Lama on sort of inner peace, which are easy to read and translatable to anyone. But then if we come down and we sort of look in the modern world today, like International Crisis Group, they publish a whole range of different publications, which are really good to read. I sort of got, I don't know, I'll probably get 10 or 20 different newsletters coming in today from a whole range of different organisations. And I don't read all of them, but Rusi, let's say from the UK, they're pretty good. Chatham House, many others. So you've got Lions for Peacebuilding, for example. They have stuff coming out. And so get on a number of these different feeds, and like that gives you the ability then to be able to sort of look for the articles which you're really interested in and follow. You can go sort of like we've got things we put out. We've got a regular newsletter we put out. We've also got something we put out each week called Future Trends. What it does is it looks at the news of the week, picks about 20 articles which give an insight into the future. So something like that, if you're interested in it, that's really good as well. And there's sort of various journals and publications you can go for. There's the Peace Digest. You can look at that. That has the regular articles on it, and I could keep going. There's tons of things out there. Okay, tons of things.
And one of the things that you're pointing out is that if you connect with something like the Alliance for Peacebuilding, there are members in that alliance that will also have their additional resources. So there will be opportunities to continue down a very rich resource line. And I do also recommend the United States Institute of Peace has free courses that you can take on peace building that are online, as well as abundant resources for middle and high school students, for those of you working with younger kids, and the Teaching Tolerance as well, or Center for Justice now. Jose put here the visionofhumanity.org in the chat, and the Positive Peace Implementation Guide that includes the 8 pillars. Thank you. I would like
one personal bit of advertising. So we've got a Positive Peace Academy which we run online, which runs out of Vision of Humanity. So it's free. So it's for people to do as well if they want to understand positive peace.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to combine the next questions into one. What is next for you in the Institute and for the Index? And what, since you mentioned the Dalai Lama, what do you do to practice personal peace and to take care of yourself?
Okay, great. Well, try and answer it in a minute, but it could go for an hour. Okay, so there's two areas. We're getting much more deep into societal systems. So I don't think that we're developing a framework at the moment for sort of analysing societal systems using mathematical techniques combined with the other qualitative techniques as well. So that's a big thrust for us going forward. The other thing too is I'm working with the organisation, putting a bit of investment into, which can use the camera on the computer, which is looking at us, and the analysis of the voice to determine people's emotional state. And what we're going to do is run surveys around the world to try and assess people's levels of inner peace and happiness. And like one's an Eastern concept, one's a Western concept. And from that, we'll then try and isolate what societies are the happiest, and then look at the social, economic dimensions around it, so that we've got a true understanding of how we should go, what sort of societies we should be developing. I think they'll turn out to be very different. The problem today is we either do it through surveys, and like in some societies, you're only silly if you say what you think. You're a little bit naive. Authoritarian societies, they'll really tell you what you think you want to hear. And then the other ones, way of doing it currently is looking at socioeconomic development, like per capita income, life expectancy, education levels. And that's a byproduct of just wealth. So that's it for me. Sort of, I've got a 45-year meditational practice, okay, and I do up to 2 hours a day. It may seem strange in a life where I'm working 60 to 80 hours a week, but don't feel stressed at all. So look, so I thoroughly recommend meditational techniques, but you've got to stay away from sort of a lot of Western gurus and stuff like that, and really try and sort of get stuff which is true and tried over long periods of time. Don't expect too much. Meditation is something you do over a long period of time to get the benefits. It's not like something you can sit down and sort of practice mindfulness and master it, even in doing it 20 minutes a day for a month. Okay, it's something which takes many years, but you just slowly improve over time. But yeah, so for me, it builds a massive amount of inner peace, builds your inner energy as well, and sort of and bliss. The other thing which comes with it's bliss.
Bliss is something that I would certainly like for all of us to have a little more of. I would like to ask you to say farewell to us. I can't thank you enough, Steve, for taking time to engage with us in the space of learning and inspiration for our community of peace builders. I know that you have to go, and so if the others of you can stay on, I'll just speak a little bit about this series and offer additional thanks. But thank you, Steve, for being with us today. We appreciate you very much.
Okay, look, thanks, Mayor. I've really enjoyed being here. Thanks for all the questions, everyone. And yeah, no, it's been fun, and all the best with your lives.
Thank you, and we'll see you again.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, and to the rest of you, this series was inspired by the desire to showcase the many ways in which one can put peace into practice across fields, across cultures, across sectors. Please give us suggestions for who you would like to see in the future next year. And the work that so many of you who are watching have done offers remarkable examples for all of us. So give us your good ideas, your creativity. Today, I hope that you got something from Steve's talk. As some folks say, what we measure, we treasure, and the index really has served as a powerful tool to help facilitate the measurement process and to make those who really want to see peace concretized feel more satisfied about participation in the peace process. I want to thank all of you viewers for continued engagement with this series. Thank you for your presence, your questions, your interest, your curiosity. It means a lot to us that you show up for these conversations. And we do want to know that we are open for your feedback, your your queries, your ideas, and let us know what support you need to help you along your journey in building peace in your communities. There are a number of resources that we at the Matsunaga Institute and our partners have put into the world. We hope that this information, these resources motivate you and inspire action right from where you are right now. And we are deeply grateful, Mahalo, for taking the time to be here and to share and to be part of our ongoing ohana, our family. And be well until next year. Take care. Malama pono.